Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you're watching this, you probably know why it's important to create more and consume less. If you think you're uninformed and if you're curious, I created a video that you could watch right here. But for a quick recap, there's an endless sea of content out there. Jake and John, the author of this book, Make Time, they say that there's something called an infinity pool, meaning the apps we use, the website we use, anything we use for content consumption, there's an endless supply of, and it wouldn't even take our entire lifetime to go through all of it. And because this technology we use is always being updated and is making us more and more comfortable, it's putting us in a state where we just don't want to move. And how Newton would say it, a state of rest stays at rest, and vice versa. So to counter this, we want to be in a state of creation, because that's an active state. And when we're in this creation state, it makes us learn quicker and we feel accomplished because we worked on something. We put in work. And it helps us fight against that feeling of, oh, where did my day go? So going back to how to create more, I'm distilling the strategies of different leaders and thinkers, and I'm breaking it down to 5 different parts. Breaking bread, the war of art, David and Goliath, intentional consumption, and slow burns. First one is breaking bread, which simply means sharing what you know to another person. We're constantly learning stuff from reading a book, listening to a podcast, watching a video, and most of the time the content we consume are things that are interesting to us. So we're basically condensing whatever we learn into a storytelling format and telling it to another person. And this helps us learn faster because we're going over the information twice in our heads. For example, when I read a new book and learn a new concept and share that with someone else, I'm putting myself in a position where I'm forced to go over the material again just so I can explain to that other person. And because we don't want to look dumb when we're talking with another person, we have to really try to articulate whatever we learn in a concise way. And to do that, that involves distilling the information to its core. As the famous physicist Richard Feynman would say, we don't truly know something until we're able to explain it to a 6-year-old. And we can do this using any platform. It could be writing a blog article, creating a YouTube video, putting it out on social media, essentially sharing it with at least another person. And I think this applies to physical skills as well. For example, when I learn a new dance move or when I learn a new skill in calisthenics, I think about how would I teach it to another person, because that makes me break down each individual step. So the next time I perform that move in dance or calisthenics, whenever I'm stuck, I actually refer back to those different steps I outlined earlier. So even though the purpose was to share with other people, I still use the information myself. Second one is called the war of art. And this comes from a book with the same name. And the premise of that book is basically saying we're at war with ourselves. There's this mental resistance we face whenever we're trying to put in the reps on anything we're trying to create, which leads to procrastination. For example, if you're a writer or if you're just trying to write something, sitting down and writing is probably the hardest part. And I think this applies to any other skill or task like coding, design, outlining your life. Just starting is the hardest part. So in order to create more and consume less, we need to create a ratio of creation to consumption with the number being heavily skewed towards creation. For me, it was literally starting from the smallest amount possible. It was making myself write for half a minute. And the next day it turned to a minute. And then the next day it turned to 2 minutes. And I kept building my way up from there. Another thing I tried, which I got from this book, Ultralearning, and the author suggests that we should have something called a struggle timer. Because the first couple minutes of a task is the most grueling period, because that's the transition period, we should set a timer to overcome just that first portion. For example, I set a timer for myself for 15 minutes. Because for me, I've noticed the first 15 minutes is the hardest part. And then once I started getting comfortable with that, and because I gained confidence from realizing that I can do consistent deep work for 15 minutes, I started doing the Pomodoro technique, which is 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. I didn't start with the Pomodoro technique because even 25 minutes was too hard for me. So yeah, going back, I feel like this applies to any skill we're trying to learn. If we're trying to learn photography, it could be taking pictures for the first 5 minutes and slowly building your way up from there. Third strategy I have for you is called David and Goliath. And this is a story where Goliath is this giant terrorizing the town, and the only person challenging him is this small kid named David. And I feel like we have both David and Goliath within us, where Goliath is a part of us where we feel like we know everything, so we don't really put in the work, but we want to bring out the inner David to challenge Goliath and really humble him. And I think this one makes learning fun. For example, if I'm learning how to code, I can set a challenge for myself where the end goal is me creating my own video game. For myself, in learning how to create videos and storytelling, I gave myself a challenge of creating 10 YouTube videos, and to see whether this is something I want to continue pursuing or not. The challenge makes it fun and it humbles myself, where I realize making YouTube videos is a lot harder than I thought. The fourth one I have is something called intentional consumption. And I gotta give credit where credit is due. This is something I got from Jay Shetty, some social media monk. Whenever he consumes information, like reading, browsing through social media, he does so intentionally. In a way, he's always analyzing what he can bring back to his lab to create. That way he's not going through rabbit holes and endlessly scrolling through social media. And I want to connect this to what James Clear says, the author of The Atomic Habits. He says our inputs affect our outputs. Our physical environment has such a big impact on what we think and what our actions are. And now, because most people spend their time on the digital space, whatever we're consuming digitally becomes our output. It affects our performance. So he says, imagine your social media is like a little town that you create, where you're the mayor of the town. And we should regularly go through this audit process where we meticulously and methodically choose who we want in our city. So that basically means being very selective in terms of who we follow, because the type of people we follow affects our output. And I have to say that me following this idea was a real game changer in terms of creating content. Because now my newsfeed is a bunch of different cool ideas and gems from different leaders, thinkers, and performers. I'm no longer mindlessly scrolling down looking at memes. And no judgment for the people who do that. If that's your way of relaxing, awesome. But if you want to learn how to create more, I feel like having this system in place really helps us learn how to consume in a way that helps what we create. The last tip I've been utilizing, and I can also say this has been a big game changer, comes from a productivity wizard named Tiago Forte. He has a strategy called slow burns, which he contrasts with something called a heavy lift. People who do heavy lifts are people who work on one project from beginning to end, which is good, but there's a better strategy in terms of long-term creation. I know other content creators, and myself included, we have this question of what else can we make? What else can we create? There's this period of confusion whenever we complete a project. However, with the slow burn strategy, we're working on multiple projects at the same time, and we're building that up from our normal default activities. For example, we all consume a lot of content from a day-to-day basis. When I go work out, I listen to a podcast. Whenever I have my downtime, I read. But whenever we listen to or read an interesting bit of wisdom, instead of having the information disappear in space, this system allows you to capture that information and put it in the appropriate box or folder for the next couple projects you have lined up. So what's necessary is we should have a granular view of what different types of projects we want to tackle. And we slowly build these projects through time, like everything slow cooking in the back burner. So whenever we finish with the current project we currently have, there's a bunch of other projects we can get to, and we're not even starting from scratch. It'd already be like 70–80% done. Because like I said, we've been working on it through time. And this has been a game changer with writing blogs and creating videos. I'd be reading something from a book and I'd be like, oh, that's pretty interesting for me to write about. So I create another folder reminding my future self that I want to talk about that topic. Another way I've been using this is, let's say I listen to something about Stoicism and I know that I want to create a video on Stoicism one day. So I'll just capture that information and put it in that Stoicism folder I have. So the next time I look at that folder, I already have a bunch of information in that folder. This has been so helpful for me in continuing to work on projects. So I really need to thank people like Tiago Forte and Ali Abdaal for bringing this concept into the public. You can find all the people I mentioned in the description box below. Once again, I'm not a master of any of this. These are just strategies that I've tried out for myself and it's been working for me. So hopefully it brings value to anyone who's trying to create more and consume less. I appreciate you all watching, and if you have any suggestions on what I should create next, please put it down in the comment section below. In the meantime, if you're curious about why I chose to be a content creator, I made a video on that recently and it's right here. As always, I hope you have a good one. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.